Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today is a book I'm really excited about, Manuele Fior's The Interview. This is one of the books that I picked up in Fantagraphics Fanabuck sale, where I pre-ordered everything from Fantagraphics that I want for the rest of the year, and then ordered books like this that I've really been wanting, and some other books that just caught my eye on their website. But this book, definitely been looking forward to. I'm a huge fan of Manuel Fior's stuff. I think I have all of his other work that's been translated: Celestia, 5,000 kilometers per hour, and his collection of short story Blackbird Days. So far, out of all of those books, this is my favorite one. I think this has like his style. I mean, he's very stylistically diverse, which I appreciate, but this is like, I think, a core style, or just a style that works really well for me, with these almost calligraphic black and white. It looks like, brushwork, and just really simple cartooning. And then in this one, you've got like ink washes and pencil over top of it, but it's all held down by the impeccable, almost abstract design of the drawing. I mean, really just a powerful cartoonist. He strikes me as a wave of artists that I'm seeing more and more and more of now, that seems really, really trained in the arts and are really hitting what I think is the full potential of comics, maybe for the first time. Like, we talked about the potential of comics and got a lot of stuff, like Mouse or the early Fantagraphics work, that showed potential for comics but was still a bit too hung on to like the narratives and stuff of the past. I think Manuel Fior and other artists are really, really pushing comics into the full sophistication that they could have in terms of the combination of storytelling and art. And this book is by far the best one of his that I've read. I mean, here you can see this page, just these absolutely amazing, like, abstract compositions. This panel in particular just really grabs me. But you can always tell what's going on. It's very clear cartooning as well, but they just such solid abstractness underneath them. So stark and compelling, so full of energy and life. They feel really fresh and confident. So just absolutely love him as an artist. Kind of reminds me of some of the stuff that I've seen by Roman Muradov, who I would also put in that category of people who seem like art school trained, that are really now bringing that into comics and pushing comics to their full potential. Someone else that I'm really excited about and want to get more work from. And then Antoine Koss, whose art I've always liked, but stories have never really grabbed me. Manuel Fior in this book kind of takes the power of that art and really pushes it to its full potential. So let's get into the story then, because I could rave about the art all day. This character driving here, Raniero, is the main character. He's a psychologist that works at a hospital, and this is set in like 2048 or something like that. We're a little bit in the future, but not too far, where things look unfamiliar. But out for a drive and sees these triangular shapes, and that catches his attention and causes a crash. And that's how the book starts out. And just, you can see this sequence, just the artwork is gorgeous throughout, absolutely beautiful. He's struggling with his wife. There's some really beautiful scenes between them here, really amazing rendered scenes here. But their relationship's falling apart. He's kind of struggling in life, and then he gets introduced to this patient, Dora. And Dora is sent to him because her parents think she's hallucinating. She's talking about seeing UFOs, and so she gets sent to this hospital. Also comes out that she's part of a polyamorous movement called the New Convention, which is based on the principle of emotional and sexual non-exclusivity. And that actually is the core of the book. The UFO just seems to be like, I don't know, something thrown in there on the top to distract you from the core of the book, which is the generational struggle between a generation that's been raised to be monogamous, even though most of them are struggling not to cheat on their wives or to keep their relationships together, and then the younger generation, which is committed to polyamory. And I think that's interesting because Manuel Fior seems very interested in these generational struggles. Like Celestia especially, I remember giving me this, even though it was a very metaphoric and poetic book that wasn't straightforward, he very much seems interested in the clash between like progressive collectivist ideals and older, I don't want to say conservative, but older individualist ideal societies. And that generational struggle shows up again in this book, and again kind of on those lines of collectives. There's a lot of talk about telepathy, which was in Celestia as well. So this idea of like a hive mind, but where people are still kind of individuals versus true individuality. And I'm never sure where Manuel Fior falls in that debate between those two. He just seems interested in the friction between them. I always feel like he's kind of committed to this youthful, future-forward, collectivist, polyamorous vision of the future, but then he always kind of undermines that somehow in his work. So I find that interesting. And that's the main emotional thrust throughout the book, is Raniero getting involved with Dora and her friends. And, you know, obviously she's like a young, attractive patient, and they're developing an inappropriate relationship, and his marriage is falling apart. So he's like this lonely guy, and then he's got this group of young, you know, sexually loose girls that find him attractive, but he's struggling with that because he doesn't believe in that either. So it just makes for a lot of interesting content. I guess it's particularly interesting to me because there was a period before I met Tori where, you know, I was like dating a lot. I was single, and I was facing a lot of the same struggles. Like a lot of the women that me and my roommate at the time were meeting, were really into polyamory, and me and him weren't. We like had this more old school ideal, but they're a little bit younger, most of the girls we were meeting, and they were all into this idea of polyamory. And so maybe I connect with that as well, this kind of struggle. You know, it's like it should be like, oh yeah, this is great. You know, they'll just, I could be with like 5 different people and they won't be mad, but it always bothered me, and it always bothered my buddy. So yeah, I really like that in this book, that struggle. I relate to it. And I'm glad I'm out of it. I'm glad I'm not part of that, because it was just too much for me. That collectivist kind of look at love is too much for me. Too much of an individualist. But getting back to the book, there's just like, I mean, look at this page. This is where you see like each piece is like a painting, you know. It's really like each piece is a piece of art with different kind of vibes, being willing to go abstract, like using her dress to make an abstract pattern. I adore it. I adore the art in this book. It's beautiful, beautiful stuff. So atmospheric, so loose and alive. So anyways, basically aliens do show up, and that causes like some kind of mass telepathic connection between humans. So this new covenant kind of wins. Raniero, you know, moves away from his wife, and there's other stuff that goes on I don't want to talk about. So where I find the book to be most interesting and most compelling, even though it was great all the way through, is in the end, like towards the end. Then it's called The Interview, and I don't know if that's like saying this was the interview or that this is the interview, but it's weird to have that in there. And there's this like epilogue here that happens in the future. So the aliens have come, and that created some kind of like hive mind, or evolved humans in a way that they're now different. They're able to live in this collectivist society. And Dora, being one of the earliest people to have these telepathic abilities, she's become like a guru within this new world, and everyone's coming to her. She's the founder of modern telepathic thought, honorary member of the New Convention, which is the polyamorous group, and blah blah. So there's a lot of people coming to talk to her about it, and she's basically explaining what happened when the aliens came, evolved humanity to be able to be collectivist. And she even refers to the New Convention. They ask her about the New Convention and the sparks that flew during those years, and she says that was a youthful error that wouldn't have had any following if what happened hadn't have happened. So I found that interesting, and that's where he seems to cut back against his own commitments, basically I took this to mean like, hey, look, that, it was a good idea, but also a youthful error. Like that we didn't understand that human beings aren't the right type of creature for this behavior by their nature. And we needed this alien event to come change what type of creature we are to be able to pull this off. I found that really interesting, this kind, because that's how I've always felt. Like, yeah, there's these great ideals of what society could be in a collectivist sense, but we're just not that type of creature, and we will have to become something other than what we are to get there. And I'm not convinced that, like, it's even wise or even possible to actually truly want to become something other than what you are, because you're leaving yourself behind and you won't be there in this state to enjoy it. Obviously, in this story, they are, but I think that that's an interesting admission on her part, that they're, it was a youthful air. And then she does go on to lament, like, that things are different. It was something deep down, without being able to read into their mind. Knowing someone deep down without being able to read into their mind was very difficult, impossible. Basically, you could even say it took a lifetime. It was sometimes very painful. And she's saying there's states of being that we were experienced that have been completely forgotten. And that's where I find the rub, is like, are we willing to give up certain states of being for this other supposed vision, utopian vision of the future? And she seems to be suggesting a bit that there's some really, really amazing things that we would lose out on. And they ask her, such as falling in love, for example. They're obviously an emotionally and sexually polyamorous society, but they're also loveless, as far as I can tell, based on what she says here. And so she describes to them, what love is. And that's kind of the ending of the book. And so, again, I think Fior is like constantly coming back to this idea of the friction between our utopian hopes and what we are as a creature. And I'm always a bit confused of where I think he, as an author or thinker, lands. And I'm always a bit worried that I'm mapping my own thoughts, like I just did, on top of it. But I always seem to think that he's a bit skeptical of it all. Like, he's very curious about it, but skeptical. So I find this book very, very, like, deep and rich, well drawn, obviously. I couldn't recommend it enough. And if you haven't already grabbed your copy and you want another book that's centered around a car crash, make sure to go grab your copy of The Strange Death of Alex Raymond, newly nominated for Best Reality-Based Work in the Eisners. So now an Eisner-nominated book by myself and Dave Sim. Jumps off from the point of Alex Raymond's death in a car crash, and that sends Dave down to a very intense research project that covers basically the whole history of comics and eventually the history of the universe. It's a wild ride and a beautiful book, thanks to Sean's reproductions. And then make sure that you pay attention to the other books that Sean has coming from Living the Line: Yuichi Yokoyama's Plaza, Eric Creek's The Exile, and Neil Van de Peet's Centralia. Thanks for following along. Take it away, Jack.